Welcome to the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast, a podcast we are seeking to lead change while also seeking to understand. We are also here as a platform to provide leaders to come together to unite, to develop, and empower other leaders in the areas of business, family, faith, and community. I'm your host, Lafayette Lane, joined by my co-host, John LeBrun, and today we are joined by special guest, Mark Villareal. Those of you that will watch this, you can put those hands together and clap for our special guest. You can put those clap emojis in the comment section. Today, he's here to join us in a special conversation that many in our generation can relate to. Today, we'll be talking about millennials, myths, facts, and half-truths. A little bit about our special guest, Mark. He has spent 35 years in corporate America, with 25 years being at the C-level. His passion is development of others and mentoring other aspiring leaders. So today, again, we are definitely encouraged and excited about this conversation about millennials, the facts, the half-truths, and the myths. Again, we ask you to, those of you that will watch this, definitely hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to all of our YouTube channels there and our social media platforms. We'll get to those a little bit later. But let's jump into the conversation. Mark, let's start off by just laying the foundation. What are some of the basic myths about millennials?
Well, first, I think there's a danger that they get grouped in. If you're a millennial, you're part of all this. So that's one of it. Like every millennial must be the same. And that's not true for any work group. Second, there's the myth that all millennials are entitled. They feel that there's an entitlement, and there's funny videos out there that even make jokes about that. Of, hey, I've worked here 3 years and I've come to work every day on time. So where's my promotion? So those are some of the myths. One of the big myths I find is that they say millennials aren't loyal, and they'll have many jobs and they'll jump to job, which sometimes people say, so why invest in them? Why develop? Or, that type of thing. There's a lot of other myths about, how early they'll get up to what they do for their own development. I think the biggest danger is how they're grouped with everyone together. And so it's like, you have the older work groups. I'm a baby boomer that, I went to work because of the pay. I needed stability. I needed to provide for my family. And it's like the myth is that these people are different. And I don't have the concept of understanding them because, you do it because you're told to. You do it because you took the job, type of thing, mentality that maybe an old baby boomer like myself, you can tell by the gray hair, that might think or believe. And so it's just whenever you put everybody in a box, that's a danger.
Yeah, I love that closing statement that you said. When you put everybody in a box, it's definitely a danger. And being a fellow millennial myself, it's very disheartening when you've mentioned some of those things. I've heard them, whether that be via social media or just people that are in conversation and passing from a different generation, when most of the millennials that I know are doing great things. They're hard workers. They want to achieve next level, and they want to go further than the last generation. And many have the mindset that me and John have, to be that bridge, to be that gap, to close the gap between those generations.
Right.
I myself, we see different gaps between the previous generations, and I'm not of the mindset that it's kind of a competition or a versus, but how can we collaborate in an effort to further the legacy of the next generation that's coming after us? Why do you think that there is a perception that millennials are so different? Why do you think that people have that perception?
Well, here's what I work when I work with companies and organizations. And, I wrote my book, The Millennial Factor, based on my own experiences, because I helped our organization build call centers, and with the development, working with millennials, I had high success with them. And they think that they're different, but they're not. And so let me explain it this way. If you were to take an average baby boomer like myself and say, what are the top 10 things that are important to you? I would put them in an order. If you do that with someone that's a millennial, they would put theirs in an order. Surprisingly, we have the same top 10 things. They're just in different order. And so the top 10 things to a baby boomer was, like I said, what is my pay? What is the stability that I have with this organization? You know, where a millennial is, you know, what are the values of the organization that I'm going to go to work for? What is their reason for existence, which is their mission statement? You know, what is the culture going to be like when I'm there? And although pay is important, that's actually probably 8 or 9 for a millennial. Millennial is, you know, how is is my leader going to be authentic? Is he going to communicate and tell me the why? Understanding the why is, like, I would say that's probably number 3 or 4 to a millennial, where it's probably number 10 for a baby boomer. It's like, the why is because I get my paycheck. However, here's one thing that I say is, and that I discovered, and as I worked through it, is your real successful leaders out there that are just really good, that over communicate, that are very transparent, that repeat. I always say great leaders repeat themselves. They explain the why. You know, baby boomers and the other work groups they'll be very successful with, because, you know what, I didn't have to know the why, but when you tell me, I appreciate it. It motivates me, you know, but they will have success with millennials because those are the things millennials are working for. So, and this happened to be where I fell. I'm one. In fact, I used to have a sign in my office that said, until your people start mocking you, you haven't said your message enough. And I would always explain one of the things that I'm big on in communication, and I preach this when I work with organizations, is when do you set expectations? Well, before you hire the person, hopefully in your hiring process, when you interview them, when you hire them, and every chance that you get, you know. So, and I would tell people even, you know, I would say, hey, John, yeah, great. You know, one of the reasons you're being interviewed is because we exceed our expectations. We believe that you fit that. And should you be hired, you're not coming on to accept this job to meet expectations, but to exceed them. And let me explain to you what that means. And so I would just over communicate, but I would even tell John, hey, John, a little bit about myself. I repeat myself a lot, and I'm letting you know that. And, you know, you might think it's important what I'm repeating, because it's probably important to me if I keep repeating it. And then I explain, you know, like I said, I set expectations. The entitlement opportunity I eliminate on day 1, or even in the interview process. But we teach organizations to create what's called career lattices, not career ladders. And when you create a career lattice, it shows every position on your organization, lateral moves up or down, and what is the skills, what is the knowledge and the traits that you need to work in those categories. And that way, when you explain on day 1, hey, here's our career lattice, here are the great opportunities you have with your organization, whether you want to move up. Actually, there's lateral moves that you can make. And because we like to list the skills, traits, and knowledge, you might want to take some self-accountability if you desire one of those positions. Because one of the things that I preach is, in Lafayette, if I would recommend that you take some self-accountability in your own development. And here's why. Because if you're interested in moving lateral, you know, moving up in our organization, being recognized and helping develop, because we want you to be successful here. When you take self-accountability on some of your development, and maybe even come to me and ask what are some of the things I can learn on my own, when I have money, time, energy to invest in somebody, you make that choice easy. When I have an opportunity to promote someone, you make that choice easy. And so by setting expectations on day 1, there's no room for entitlement. And that works for everybody. So great, you know, what happens is, I think in some sense is that there's been some things in the workforce to where it's because I hired you. You know, I once had a sales manager ask me, I don't understand our people. And these weren't millennials at the time. This was 20, 30 years ago. He says, but they're adults. Can't we just tell them once and that's it? And I explained to him, no, because people learn, our development is learned as we get raised. And this is why I always explain, I manage by rewards or consequences, just like hopefully you were raised. I'd love to manage you by rewards, but there will be consequences. And John, let me ask you that if I see that there's at any time you're doing something that I think might hinder your success, would you want me to point that out to you and correct you? And I tell you that on day 1, you always say yes. But that helps me because I already set expectations that when I go to correct your behavior or something that's maybe you're just not doing correct, totally correct, I can remind you of that conversation because I'm doing it for your benefit. So it's how you set, and that's all set in culture. And I think the second chapter of my book is culture is everything. So everything you do is establishing that culture from the top down, and then it starts permeating from the bottom up that people protect it. And that's the environment you want.
Sure. There seems to be a breakdown in the communication that because millennials tend to ask more information that somehow, they're kind of challenging authority, when the reality is that's the world that we live in. We live in an information age. Mm-hmm. So no longer can you just present us with, here's the facts and just believe it. It's right. Kind of like, okay, we've got to fact check that, prove it 2 or 3 times, then we'll believe it after we've done our own research. That sort of type of deal. You talked about the instability factor that people believe about millennials, that they're not reliable in the job force or in the corporate America. What advice would you give to those that believe that millennials are unstable and they just jump from job to job because they lack loyalty? What advice would you give to those that have that certain belief?
Well, understand that, the things that are important to them. So I would say always communicate and over communicate. Explain the why. And instead of, sometimes I think others may not explain the why because of pride, right? But when you explain the why, here's why we do this. Here's why I'm asking you to do this. Here's the result that we're looking for. You're actually teaching good habits and you're building transparency, but trust is everything. Millennials, and in fact, the title of your podcast talks about authenticity.
Right.
Millennials love leaders who are authentic. Yeah. And so they build that loyalty. But the biggest thing that I say is when they say millennials will jump job to job, is I say, well, you haven't shown them what a career is. And it's because of, that's why we build the career lattices. That's why we complain about self-accountability. That's why, I talk about a communication plan, a coaching plan, and then accountability, the 3 biggest things in managing anybody. But millennials thrive on, are you communicating with them? Are you coaching them constantly? And then are you teaching them about accountability? First, self-accountability, and then the accountability that comes with, let's talk about your development plan, because I want you to develop. And that's part of rewards or consequences. I've had many millennials, and in fact, if you read the back of my book, I had millennials endorse it that worked for me, because that's where the power was. And one of them named Joshua that started with me, he was 20 years old, knew nothing in sales. It was a sale, and he became so loyal and he would listen that at the age of 23, he bought his own house. He's 27 now and makes 6 figures. And he's just like, I understood the why. I became motivated. And some of the hesitancy on millennials, there are some differences, but it's only because at the different times that we were raised through. I did not grow up in the digital age that millennials grew up in. And so the difference is that millennials do expect quicker answers because they had access to it. Well, I'll just go Google it. I'll just go find it out myself. And this is where I would say that I always found millennials were the most courageous workforce. Let me go do it. And I would have to hold them back more than push them forward. So that is some advice that I would have on people leading millennials. Understand that we have to understand the why. That's the why. They grew up in the digital age. They grew up with cell phones, and everything that they could get quick answers that I didn't have. And as you explain the why, and we have a responsibility to teach these things anyway, and so when you create an environment of, what, I want you to be successful here. I want you to learn, but I'm going to coach you, and I'm going to coach you openly. And it's because, I want you to strive and be successful, and you do that consistently. The loyalty just grows. Trust is, there's a book called The Speed of Trust, and they say trust is like a bank account. You can make a lot of deposits, but one withdrawal can wipe out that whole bank account. And so that's why values are so important to millennial. What are the values that we're going to live in our organization? But it's the responsibility of the organization to exhibit those values and hopefully not sacrifice one of them. There are times that I'll explain that if I say respect is one of our values, and maybe, you know, John, you said something and I jumped the gun and got on you, and I'd have to say, John, you know, first of all, respect is one of our values, and I just did not show you respect. I apologize. And so there are ways I can earn that back. My actions will have to show that after the point. But there's if ethics is one of your values, and hopefully they are, that's one value that if you sacrifice, it's hard to earn respect back, because others will see that. And so that's why the culture is the foundation. On top of that is the values, and then the mission. What is the reason for existence of our organization? And is my leadership showing that we're living it? And after that, it becomes a great job. You know, it's like, this is a career. I know the difference now. And that's our responsibility.
So go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just saying that's good.
Okay.
That's good.
So,
and I keep reprimanding John. Sorry, John.
That's all right. I'm used to it. Lafayette's always getting. No, I'm kidding. So I'm 37, almost 38. I come on the very, very beginning side of the millennials. Lafayette's 27. He comes on the opposite side. Mm-hmm. So when you mentioned like high touch, I was actually in high school when high speed internet was like coming out to be a thing. Sure, you know what I mean? There was no Wi-Fi. It wasn't a thing. When I was in high school, you still messed up the internet by picking up the phone. And you know, so I read a book and it was talking about Gen Y, it's the millennials, and he almost sectioned it off into two groups, Gen Y and Gen YI, which started in the 90s. Right. But anyways, so when we talk about loyalty, I hear the same things. Millennials lack loyalty. They go from job to job. Mm-hmm. And part of me thinks, and if you can talk to it, I don't think millennials lack loyalty any less than any other generation. I just sometimes think that maybe they lack complacency is my theory. When I look at companies, they have shown, especially the bigger they get, and I don't fault the company necessarily in every situation, but early on, companies were formed and employees would start and finish. They would retire at the same company. Well, as that grew, companies couldn't sustain those, and they filed bankruptcies and different things, and people no longer had their retirements or pensions or whatever they called it, and then they started 401ks, and that's a whole other story. But we've seen time and time again, I have growing up, friends of my friends' parents just killing themselves at a company, and then the company has to do massive layoffs. So on one hand, they command almost loyalty, but then on the other hand, as soon as there's a hiccup with like a stock or something, a bad quarter, there's massive layoffs. And then they wonder why, as we watch our parents go through these things, we don't have massive loyalty towards a company. Now, I believe that millennials do have massive loyalty towards a cause or towards a purpose, but maybe not towards the banner on a building, if that makes sense. So, and as I was working for a large company, I don't work there anymore. Family started their own company and so forth. Maybe I just lack loyalty, but I remember as I would advance through that company, people would get apprehensive if there wasn't enough opportunity or they didn't perceive enough opportunity, meaning there's 20 employees and one advancement. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what we had done, and I remember our department had a really good rate of employees staying, is we'd find opportunities within their roles for these employees to grow within their own current space. So they didn't have to have an advancement. They didn't care about the advancement. The advancements didn't really give you that much more money, just responsibilities and so forth. But we could find new projects, new responsibilities, new ways for them to grow as people and as employees on the company, and therefore they would feel valued and feel like they had a new purpose and didn't get stagnant. And that seemed to work really well. But I don't know. Can you just talk that a little bit? Do they really lack loyalty, or do they lack complacency? Is it really the millennials' fault, or is it, if it's true, or is it the company's fault for years of, massive layoffs and watching that stuff?
Well, you said a lot there, so let me.
I know. I'm sorry.
Try to hit each point that you made. Yeah, I will say this: it's always the organization and the leader's responsibility to create the environment and sustain it. So if it's anybody's fault, and even if that perception, if you came in with that perception from other companies or everything that you saw, it's my responsibility to set the perception that I want you to believe and demonstrate it. Because at first, if I set all those expectations, I tell you about self-accountability, that you want to grow, rewards or consequences. I let you know that I'm going to coach you constantly, but I'll also let you know that, John, I'm going to spend my energy because I want to spend my energy where it's going to make an impact. Let me tell you, John, that if you're coachable, I'll always give you the benefit of my time. But if you start showing me that you're not coachable, and you might see me start spending my energy elsewhere. So let me just give you that warning, because if you think I'm not giving you enough time, please ask me, because the answer may not be too surprising. But I want you to value your growth here as much as I do, and I'll show you that I do. So my consistency will show that, and that's where communication comes in. I did have a millennial just recently, just like with the last 2 weeks that I've been working with, and he was like, he was saying that I was right about the values and your reason for existence. He says, because we've been told for so many years, first of all, watching what you just described sometimes with our parents, and then we're told that our Social Security won't be there by the time that we, so why do I want to work for a company all these years? But that's why environment is more important to me than me putting 30 years with the company, because my Social Security will not be there, that type of thing. So that's where it's our responsibility to create the environment, talk about the difference between job and career. But here's another thing that I did do with the culture. And I always say, if you give me 110%, I would do everything to advance your career within our organization, within our corporation, if we're maybe or a subsidiary of someone, or with other organizations that don't even belong to us. And so we created an environment to where just one guy wanted to own his own roofing company. Well, that's great. Give me 110%. And you know what? Even with your self-development, some of this self-development stuff's going to help you when you become your own boss in a roofing company. And that guy owns his own roofing company now. But he would then refer other employees like, this is a great company to work for, because they'll do 110% to advance your career, even if it's outside working for them. And so we became a place where employees were always referring other people to come apply, because we were a place that people wanted to work. So that was part of what we did for that as well. Is there anything else I missed in that answer?
No, I don't think so. You're good.
Okay. So, well, I tried to go 1, 2, 3, 4 points, but that's why.
It was really just more of, I hear the lack of loyalty comment often, and I just don't buy into it. Is there people who lack loyalty? Obviously. But that goes for every generation. That goes with marriages. That goes with a lot of areas, not just work. But my personal perspective from being in corporate America was, most of the associates who you want to keep on your team, that's key. Some there's always that random associate you're like, they can go and I'm fine with it. But that you want to keep are not unloyal, but they really just want to keep growing. And as soon as they cannot find growth for themselves, or they don't see opportunities to grow, they start seeking for those opportunities elsewhere.
Well, that's why you did mention something I didn't hit on. Innovation, to create an environment where you want people to be innovative and creative and share their ideas, that they can create and expand maybe their current role. They may not get promoted, but you know what? That's a great idea. And there's a great book called Blue Ocean Strategy that I work with when I'm working with one organization now, actually, where it's like, how do you create that environment that you want people feedback? And in fact, we call it a first team environment, and that comes from the book 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So I don't reinvent the wheel all the time, but because there's great books out there. And that 5 dysfunctions of a team teaches, I want to hear your opinions even when you disagree. But we're going to have a first team environment that you'll be able to share your opinions professionally. It's not gossiping behind my back or going to talk, John coming to me because he has a problem with Lafayette and just wants to talk about it. I would say you need to go to Lafayette and have that conversation, because that's called a first team conversation. That's the environment and part of the culture that we create as well. But I value your opinion. I value your feedback. When we do strategic planning or create other things, let's talk about those plans. You'll have your opportunity. Doesn't always mean that we'll take a percentage of everybody's and make the decision. Ultimately, the leader has to make the right decision for the organization, but we will be transparent and allow you to be heard. But because we have that environment, whatever decisions we make, we expect you to own it as if you made the decision yourself. 100%. So that's all called a first team environment. And when you create that type of culture that people have that ability to disagree, and it's like I've been heard, and that's great. Or, they value my opinion, they at least seek feedback, but also they encourage me to be innovative and creative and come up with new ideas. That's how the companies expand, So we always, I talk about empowerment. So another organization I work with, we're working with change management. And one of the first issues is your people don't know, first of all, what they're empowered to do within their roles. It's the first thing I discovered. If they don't know that, what decisions they could make or what they're empowered with, some roles might have more empowerment to spend money, maybe if it's especially in customer service. You need to empower your people, and then you need to teach them how to problem solve and make decisions, and give them the parameters in which they can do that. And then you need to let them loose and then coach them as they do that. Sometimes when they make a decision, say, man, you know what, Lafayette, I appreciate that you made a decision. Walk me through your mindset when you made that decision. And because I taught you problem solving and decision making, and I should understand your mindset. Did you ask this question, ask this question, ask this question? I might coach you on what you might have thought of differently, but I will reward you because you made a decision. I'll be appreciative of that. Early in my career, I was what was considered a turnaround specialist. I had the ability to go in a struggling business or location, and it wasn't Mark that did it, but I would dissect, and then with the people we would put a plan together. First thing I did was teach everybody how to problem solve and make decisions, and then I would empower them. And you surround yourself with problem solvers and decision makers, your job becomes easier. But both of you, if you were working in an organization that it's like, here's what your role is, you might say, I want to expand it more. Well, great, let's have that discussion. Well, great, how do I need to empower you? Great, what are the things that you're not sure if you can do? Because I want to make sure that you know that you can, and to what extreme. That's a motivating factor there as well, because you're growing, and that's what we want you to do, is grow. So we had the environment. I told you that we will do. Give me 110%. We'll do everything to advance your career. I had one business where we had 4 people who started with us at an entry level that ended up becoming managers, and then our corporation came and recruited them away. All 4 different ones that became regional managers for the international company. Did I hate that? I wasn't greedy to say, don't take my people. I'm like, that's the environment I created. And I had a pipeline of people that wanted to work for us, and that created opportunities. For those people, that's like, man, there's always opportunities with this organization, because people are getting promoted even outside of this organization. Here's where I want to work.
As a baby boomer, how can we as millennials do a better job with connecting with previous generations? We've talked the whole time about, generations connecting with us and perspective, but I want to flip it on the other side of the coin. What can we do as millennials, as a person from a previous generation? What can we do to better connect with you all?
Well, I say first, understand the perception that's there, and be cognizant of it, and don't sweep it under the carpet, but confront it. If you're going, and this is advice in my book, each chapter has advice for the business owner and then advice for the millennial. So one of the advice is in sales, we would teach what you call brag the objection, right? Instead of, oh, I hope they don't bring up that objection, I would teach my salespeople, bring up the objection and then show them how you, hey, obviously we're not going to be the lowest price, but let me tell you, here are the other factors, boom. Mm-hmm. So if I'm applying for a job and I'm a millennial, I would say, and let's say I did have 7 jobs in the last 2 years, right? I would say, hey, obviously you may see that I had 7 jobs in the last 2 years, but I'm applying for this organization because I'm looking for a career. And actually what made me apply here is I really love your values, your mission statement. I love that reason for existence. And when I saw the work that you did in the community, when you did Habitat for Humanity, I thought this is the place that I would like to seek a career, grow and advance. So you could see how I bragged the objection and went right into it and overcome it before I even have to be asked about it. You may say, certainly I'm a millennial. Let me talk about the perceptions that you may have. May I ask you, what are any of your concerns? And I'd be happy to answer that. I would say just be as upfront, but be prepared. If it's, I teach millennials when they're looking for a job or to look for a career. And that difference is first look at the organization's mission and values. Sometimes you could find your vision, but that's usually internal. Find out any initiatives and any community involvement. So when you go to that interview and you're speaking to that, hey, I really loved your mission. Hey, I love the values that you live here. When I work here, I really want to help you strive on your initiatives and that. So I may come and ask you what I can do for self-development. That's someone I'm going to want to hire. If as you come on and those other baby boomers and you're demonstrating that, they're going to get over that perception very quick. So, it's just bring it up, don't hide it, but understand that it's there. So, and don't come out angry about it, even though you may be, right? I'm not that way. I'm not, because there's that other one, John, you mentioned one, the loyalty one. And sometimes you hear millennials are lazy, right? And they're not. I would say I can point out many baby boomers that in my time that were lazy. You just have them in every work group. I think some of it is though, if not now, but within the next couple, I think 2 years, millennials will be 70% of the workforce. So it was just that it was such a surge of them that brought up those concerns as well. So it wasn't just, hey, a few are coming into the workforce. Pretty soon they're going to be the majority of the workforce. And we're either going to need to work with them, learn how to lead them, and learn how to create leaders of them. And so it was all that at once.
Sure. You've mentioned your book several times, and I know on your book it talks about 10 steps. Now, you don't have to give us all 10 steps because I know you want people to go purchase the book. You want to do that as well. Can you give us at least 3 or 4 of those steps to managing millennials to success?
Obviously I mentioned about, and they're called plans. So an expectations plan. What are the expectations I want people to know before they even start here, when they start here, and moving forward? And how am I going to communicate that? So that's number 2. What is the communication plan? When am I going to communicate this on day 1? In the HR manual, maybe the mission I want painted everywhere on in our office, right? In the reception, on our brochures. The values I want to have contests or awards named after the values. So that way we're going to talk about them constantly. We're going to have who lived this value of this month, who demonstrated this with the customer. So that's the communication plan. You have a culture plan. How are we going to keep the culture running? And because it has to start from the top down, but when you get that, when it hits top down, when the employees start protecting the culture, like if you hire the wrong person, and no matter the best hiring practices you have, sometimes you hire the wrong person, they will be the first to say, hey man, this guy just doesn't seem a fit, because they want to protect that culture. the coach, I have a coaching plan that you build. You know, how am I going to coach? When I'm going to coach? What do I want to coach? You know, it comes down to on the coaching, the 5 W's and the H. You know, who, what, where, and why, and how, and you break it down. And so we have charts that we help companies create. That, and it doesn't just work for millennials; it works for your whole organization. You know, development plans for every employee. That's my passion. You know, if you don't have a development plan, then shame on the leadership, shame on the organization, because we want to teach accountability. So we do teach self-accountability, but your development ultimately is still my responsibility. I think I gave you more than 2 or 3, but you know, those are
bonus tips.
Yeah.
Now you're not just concerned about the millennials, but you're also concerned about the next generation that involves upcoming future children, in so much that you are author of children's book series. Tell us a little bit more about how you got into that and what all is involved in those children's book series.
Yeah, well, I'll take a step back first. You know, It's funny, I haven't mentioned my mom yet, and usually I speak about my mom quite a bit. I'm a mama's boy, and my second book is called Leadership Lessons from Mom. My mom was a housewife, and I quote in my book that she was the best leadership coach who chose to be a housewife. So she would always tell me, one of the things that she would tell me is, I never want that little boy in you grow out of you. And the reason being is, when a little boy or little girl, but I'm a boy, as he said, you will always have big dreams and you'll always believe you can accomplish it. I want to be a fireman, Mom. I want to be a policeman. And somewhere when you start growing up, you start thinking, or you see roadblocks, and it starts squashing your dreams. Don't let that little boy in you grow up, because I want you to always believe that you can accomplish things. And so with that, I have a passion to help, and a responsibility, I believe, to help the youth live that dream on dreaming big. And so I started a children's series called The Adventures of Park Ranger Brock Cliffhanger and his Junior Park Rangers. And I started that to encourage youth to, one, have good idols or role models, and park rangers are great role models. So learn about some things that are important. I think our state and national parks are a thing of beauty. I live in one. And so we teach them about, not only about the parks and the trails, but we teach them how to take care of them. But also in there, like in the first one, it's about two kids that went hiking and get lost. And so they have to go find them. And in the book, it says, well, what are the 10 things that they didn't do that they should have done before they went hiking? What are the 6 things once they were missing that they should do? And what happens when you encounter wildlife? Because in the first story, they encountered wildlife. And so it teaches some things like that throughout the book. And so they follow the Park Ranger Brock Cliffhanger. That's the name I came up with. But it teaches the Junior Park Ranger program as well, which is a great program. And so the first one I wrote, the second one is on the Great Smoky Mountains and the fires that we had here in 2016. And it teaches them about conservation and safety and preservation. And it's just, you know, it's a passion to help them to dream big.
That is awesome. We want our Unscripted audience to connect with Mark. You can connect with him on various social media platforms. They're on LinkedIn. You can connect with him on his social media place there. Mark Villareal, also, he has a YouTube channel, Mark Villareal Shortcuts. Also, Facebook, his Facebook name is there, Mark Villareal. Also, you can find him on Twitter, connect with him. His Twitter handle is at Mark Villareal. Those that you will listen to this, it will be in the podcast description. As he's already mentioned, he's also the author of 8 published books, with one of them being The Millennial Factor, 10 Steps to Managing Millennials to Success. He also coaches and consults with businesses and delivers workshops. And his business offers a free 30-minute consultation. This has been another incredible episode here on the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast. Our audience, we definitely want you to continue to stay tuned in to what we're doing. Continue to connect with us on our various social media platforms as well. Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast on Facebook. Our Instagram handle is at Unscripted Leadership. LinkedIn, you can find us Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast. You can also stream and listen to this episode while you're riding in your car. You may not have time to watch this. We want you to stay safe. You can stream this on any podcast platform from Apple to Spotify to Google Podcasts to iHeartRadio. Wherever podcasts are streamed, you can find us there. You can even connect with us there on our website, unscripted-leadership.com, where we have some interesting things that you can connect with us on. We also have merch available when you sign up for our Unscripted email group. Once you sign up for that, you will receive a 10% off merch promo code. Again, this has been another amazing episode here on the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast. We thank our guest, Mark Villareal, for coming on, having this incredible conversation about millennials, facts, half-truths, and even myths. As always, we're here to build bridges, not walls. Bridges connect, and walls divide. Until next time, we pray that you be the leader that God has called you to be. God bless.